Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics. Do you love quilts that look complicated, that really just stop people in their tracks and you're just being showered with compliments? If you do, this quilt is for you. This is actually a design by Robert Kaufman, and this is called Medallion Star. They had a collection called Jaikumari, very exotic looking, almost Egyptian looking, stunning with metallic accents. And we said, yes, we are going to absolutely do this. You're looking at this quilt and it looks complicated. And here's the big secret. This could not be simpler with the use of two products. And I'm going to show you that today. So grab a snack, grab something to drink. You're going to be amazed at what these tools do. Because if your piecing skills have been a little bit shaky or inconsistent, that's over. So hang with me today. We have some limited kits remaining. Most of this collection is completely sold out at Robert Kaufman, and we cannot get more. And this is the beautiful coordinating backing, again, with this almost cloisonne look with metallic accents. It is absolutely beautiful. And again, I'm going to show you some notions you're going to want to pick up as well when you grab your kit and your backing. So if I told you that really this is just two blocks, you'd be like, that's not even possible. And it is. This is just half square triangles and flying geese units. And then when I examine the quilts, I'm like, that can't be true. There's got to be more to the story than that. There isn't. The only thing in addition to that would be just your inner border and outer border. We're used to that. That's not a quilt block. But as we can see, flying geese here, little tiny flying geese here, and we also have a lot of half square triangles. So we are going to start off with how do we consistently make just fantastic half square triangles, because there's a lot of them in this project. We can take the traditional approach where you're taking the two squares, right side together, drawing a line, diagonal, sewing a 1/4 inch on either side and cutting that, hoping and praying they come out accurately. Or we can take what I think is a fantastic approach to making 8 half square triangles just perfectly by sewing on some paper and then cutting them out and removing the paper. It's incredible. You might have seen me do this before. You'll get the two fabrics that are being used to make that specific half square triangle unit. Simply place them right side together, and we place our paper on top. And for this specific project, you'll be picking up the 2-inch star singles. I'll just say right now that star singles are based on the finished measurement sewn into the quilt. So here, these would be 2.5 inches unfinished, but by the time you sew a 1/4 inch all the way around all 4 sides, the finished size is 2 inches. So just take note, there are 2-inch half square triangles. By the way, star singles, if you love making half square triangles, pinwheel blocks in other quilts and other sizes, there are other sizes available you can pick up on the website, but for this specific project, the only size you need will be the 2-inch of the star singles. So as I mentioned, you'll cut your fabrics out, and we actually cut ours out just a little bit bigger than the measurement indicates on the paper. This even gives us our instructions. Cut 6-inch squares. We like to oversize ours so that we have plenty of fabric being able to be seen behind the actual paper. In fact, I'll just measure these real quick. We've actually cut these to about 6.5, because if we cut those to just 6 inches, it would be a little bit difficult to see the fabric behind that. And we want to make sure that when we're sewing around all of these different lines, that we absolutely have got both of those fabrics locked in and we're not missing anything. Once you have that, we go ahead and we pin in those open areas. You're going to always want to sew on a shortened stitch length. We use like a 1.5. Notice we have dash lines and we have some solid lines. Those dash lines are your sewing lines. So looking at our paper here, we just start off on this side. Let me turn it around as if I was at my sewing machine, and I just start right off of the paper with my shortened stitch length. And if your machine has a needle down feature, be sure to engage that, because as we sew on our dash line, when we get to that dark circle, that's where the needle stops, needle down, and we simply pivot and we come down track number 2. Needle down in the dark circle and rotate, and sew all the way around and completely off. You get the idea. Once that's done, now we begin to cut this apart on these solid lines. This is where a spinning mat is lovely to have. Not required, but if you've got one, grab it. I just grab any straight edge that I have, and I begin to cut directly on those lines all the way around, including my diagonals in here. Once you have that, this is what your triangles are going to look like. You just simply fold the paper back and start removing the paper. Easy peasy. Now I'm going to get my iron heating up here and just keep removing that paper. And of course, we're just going to press. Go ahead and press that to the darker side. That's a great convention. And the best part about this is you don't need to now square this up. This is the perfect size going into the project. I do trim off the little bit of dog ears here. And this is going to measure an exact 2.5 inches consistently. It's incredible. So as you can see, this is going to yield 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 half square triangles. You can see there's just minimal waste of fabric. There is no better way to make half square triangles fast and precise than using this technique. So that is something I highly recommend. Definitely my approach, and what we absolutely did when we made this quilt is we definitely used the star singles. It made the project come together so much faster and more precise for the half square triangles. Now, as I mentioned, there's flying geese of different sizes in here. Again, we can take the traditional approach of a flying geese, which again, just to review, is a rectangle, 2 squares in the corner. You're drawing on the line and sewing on the line, and then you're trimming the excess fabric. There's actually a lot of waste in that technique in doing that. But we have, again, a faster way with less waste and more precision. That's what we're all after, right? And this is going to be the ultimate flying geese tool by Creative Grid. So how does that all work? So let's take a look at this amazing tool here. This will make flying geese units of all kinds of sizes, ranging from as small as a 1/2 by 1, these are finished measurements again, and all the way up to 4 by 8 and many measurements in between. Most of the flying geese on here, not the little ones, those are much smaller, but for the ones that I'm demonstrating today that I'm seeing, like right in here, those are going to finish at 2 by 4. So as we look at our paperwork here, and I'm just going to turn my sheet over so that I can see it and we can talk about it together. Notice there's the letters on the left side. So this tool will go well beyond this project. So if you use flying geese blocks in many of your projects and you don't have this tool, if there's anything I would encourage you toward today, obviously besides the kit, it is this tool. I have never been able to make flying geese blocks consistently the way I can with this tool every single time. So on the left side, that's giving us our sizes. The first thing we need to do, of course, is determine what size is it that I'm making today, remembering that these are based on finished measurements. So if your pattern is saying that you are going to make a flying geese unit that is unfinished at 2.5 by 4.5, you'll know that that's letter D. And that is what we're doing for today's demonstration. Again, reminding you that in this quilt, we have a couple different sizes of the flying geese units, so you'll be using a couple of those different ones. But again, for just today, we'll be doing letter D. As we come over, notice that first number is 5 3/4. Now, what's that business about? As you look straight up, notice it says cut one of those. So I have this beautiful blue, just incredible fabric here. That's going to be my main fabric. And then as we look across still, we see 3 1/4, and you're like, what's that about? We'll look straight up and notice you're cutting 4 of those. Okay, let's look at those 4. So here are my 4 squares, right? This is where we're ultimately going to be going. Let me just show you. This is an untrimmed flying geese unit. This is where we're going. And I've got just 2 of them done so far, so that we're able to make some together. And this is just an incredible tool. I think, I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. I continue to be exposed to a lot of notions, a lot of rulers, a lot of things, as you can imagine. This remains in my top 3 most valuable assets of specialty rulers that I've ever been exposed to and that I consistently use. This is where I would put my money of any of the rulers on the table today because of the work it does and the varied sizes it produces consistently every single time. So once we've determined what is that bigger cut and what are these smaller cuts, the next step in what we're doing is to simply draw a line, and I love to actually use my crib grip seam guide to just lay that on the diagonal and draw on either side with a marking tool. You could just draw diagonal to diagonal and sew 1/4 of an inch on either side of that. Hey, if we're going to try to make this whole thing easier on ourselves, use the seam guide to just draw that, because we're always going to be more accurate every time we get to sew on a line instead of finding a line we can't see, right? Tracking 1/4 inch away from a line. Because if I had to walk the same distance next to a line, I'm going to be a little hit and miss. But if I had to walk on a line, I'm going to be much more precise. Once you have drawn those lines on all 4 of your fabrics, you'll simply place 2 of those fabrics in opposite corners. And you'll pin in position and sew directly on those lines. And just to save a little bit of time, we've done that. Now, something else I want to mention to you is notice how this has been trimmed. These fabrics overlap in this position in the middle. Some people feel, and I would agree with that statement that many people say, is that creates a lot of bulk right in the middle. How do we solve that? First thing you'll want to do is just simply secure your fabrics in the opposite corners so they're not going to move anywhere when we make this trim. This is where a nice pair of sharp scissors will come into play, and all we're doing is simply, I'm just eyeing that opposite side and I'm making a trim. That's all I'm doing is reducing the bulk. So that's the first thing you might want to do if you have been concerned about that very thing, about reducing the bulk. And I've done this both ways, both trimming and not. My blocks seem to come out okay, but I definitely, anytime we can reduce bulk is a good thing. As I mentioned, once you've done that, we're just simply going to sew on those drawn lines. And now that we have that, we just cut diagonal to diagonal. This is how, with just 5 pieces of fabric, the 1 large and the 4 smaller, we will be able to make 4 oversized flying geese units that we then get to trim up, which is a great thing. We don't have to be that precise. We will be able to oversize those and trim that up. So I'm just going to trim corner to corner, and then we're going to press away just like this. And it always looks a little odd, right? You're like, what is that? I'll show you here in just a moment. We'll get those pressed away. Remember how there's 4 total white squares in this instance. This is where the other 2 come into play. So now that we have this, with our other fabrics, same thing. We take our temporary marking tool and we simply draw on either side. And I'd mark the other one as well, and that's going to sit right in this corner. Notice how those 2 lines are jetting right up into that valley, right? You're definitely in the right position at this point. Pin, pin, sew on the lines. Same thing with this one, right? Mark it, pin it, sew it. Once we have that, this is what that will look like. Get these out of the way. There's less to look at there. And we'll just give that a trim right up that middle. And now we have 2 oversized flying geese units. And of course, with the other set, we would have 2 more. So the first part of the tool has told us, it's really our roadmap. What size finished blocks are we making? We established that. What size are we cutting our larger piece, and what size are we cutting those 4 smaller pieces? Once we're at this stage, the next part of the tool comes into play. And this is a very important and fun function that I love. We don't have to now try to just use some willy-nilly ruler. The Ultimate Flying Geese tool is going to be our best friend right now to be able to trim this. So let's again bring out our piece of paper. And remember that we were letter D. What does that mean? Why is that significant? So let's just go back and revisit that. Letter D, 2x4. Notice over here on the other side, there's a trim 1 function. Well, if there's a trim 1 function, there must be another trim 2. And there is over here on the opposite side. But let's just look at the trim 1 function. Notice it's A, B, C, D, and so on. We are still D. We are D throughout this project. That does not change for what we're doing. When we go to make our smaller flying geese units, we will now be using a different letter, something much smaller per the instructions inside your pattern. But notice how this letter D has this beautiful pyramid, a delta, I guess I would call it. This is where we take our oversized units and now we place our letter D right on top of that. So those dashed lines that are right here, I'm just going to drop that right into this pocket. What is that doing for us? That is actually exposing 2 sides, our right side and our top side, which is why we have 2 trim functions. We can't trim the whole block right now, but we can trim 2 sides of it. We'll trim our right side. Notice I'm not lifting up my project right now. I'm simply rotating that. And notice I'm rotating it in a clockwise direction. Just keep the rotation coming 1 more quarter turn. Now we can look at our block and say, all right, we get the fact that we just cleaned off those 2 edges, but those other 2 corners, those other 2 sides need to be trimmed too. This now puts trim 2 up at the top, right here, trim 2, and there's our letter D. As I drop that right into the pocket there, I now have additional things confirming that I am absolutely in the right location. I not only have the dashed lines here of D, but look at the dashed line here running right along this side and the one right across the bottom, exposing these 2 sides to trim, rotate your mat, and trim. And you truly have an incredible, perfectly sized up Ultimate Flying Geese unit, right? That is just not something that I could accomplish on my own, and then you're just simply back at it. Just remember, trim 1 function. Let me just trim another one with you. We'll speed it up. So just what you're looking for, trim 1, dash line, exposes the 2 sides, trim, trim, keep the rotation coming 1 more time, come down, D, sits right in that saddle. We have confirmation and confirmation and confirmation. We're in the right spot. Trim, rotate, and trim. Right? And now you have an absolutely perfect flying geese unit going into your quilt. And look at the minimal waste. Look at the minimal waste. The amount of waste that I have had in the past, I had my rectangle, my 2 squares in the corner, sewing on the line, and I'm trimming away a lot of fabric and throwing it away. Hey, I don't like waste, and fabric has become more expensive, right? Everything is more expensive. So not only do you have less waste, you are making 4 blocks at a time and at a level of precision that most of us just can't consistently hit. So as you can see, this quilt is actually way easier than you may have suspected, but the results are visually stunning. I want to say one more thing about the quilting on this. We sent this quilt out to our partners and friends there at Handy Quilter, and I let the pros there do the quilting. So we would love for you to take this quilt to the next level, just as they did there at Handy Quilter. And you'll be able to click on that video and watch their process of how they determine which thread, which quilting pattern, because it's absolutely fascinating. The design of the quilt is stunning, but their quilting took it to a completely separate level. So I would love for you to just keep on watching and seeing their approach And if you have been looking for a long arm quilting company to really make that investment with, I can't recommend Handy Quilter enough. I recently went to their academy and just saw the love and care that they show their customers well past the purchase of the long arm quilter. They are truly invested in making sure that their customers are continually being educated and offering additional opportunities of just being able to watch their process. So again, thanks for giving me part of your day today to show you that this show stopping quilt is so much easier than you thought. Be sure to head to the website to buy your kit, your backing, and as you can see, grab those star singles, the flying geese tool, the spinning mat, any notions you might need, and I'll see you soon at another Shabby video.